Hare Krishna. So today we are interviewing Devamrita Swami, who is visiting us here in New York on this channel, Vedic Culture and Knowledge. So we're going to ask him a few questions about his life and also about Krishna consciousness. And in this way we hope to give you all a good understanding of both spiritual life and also how to practically achieve it in everyday circumstances in the world. So I'll ask first by asking Devamrita Swami something about how he managed to come to Krishna consciousness in the beginning. So please give us some brief understanding of how it was that you managed to come to Krishna consciousness after trying many different things in the everyday world.
I grew up in a very religious family, at least on my mother's side. And so from childhood, I was always interested in what is God and how to please God. Then, of course, the teenage years came, and I became absorbed in social, political, economic thought in terms of how to change the discrepancies and injustices and imbalances in the world. That quest continued until my university days, when I made a formal decision that I would use my studies at Yale for trying to find a solution to all the world's problems. So I told my academic advisors my freshman year that this was my quest, this was my goal now. And I wanted to study whatever would contribute to my achieving that goal. So they told me, this is actually great. What you want is actually what the university is meant for. So we're going to let you study whatever you want to study. We wish that we could have done the same thing when we were students, but we weren't as brave as you. So now, plunder the university as you like, study whatever you think might shed insight on solving all the world's problems. And then they looked at me with a glint in their eyes and said, and if you happen to find a solution to all the world's problems, come back and let us know. I didn't find that solution. Through studies, very diverse, very variegated, I could see that material solutions don't make a lasting change. By the time I graduated, I was convinced I have to seek solutions on a higher level, beyond the material. But where would I find that kind of knowledge? Where would I find that kind of technology? Non-material technology. The first time I saw bhakti yogis, Krishna conscious persons, was on a television show in May of '72, a rerun, David Susskind show. And I was in my last month at Yale preparing for finals. My roommate and I turned on the television for a break. And there we saw these strange persons. We couldn't figure out who they are or what they're talking about. Especially since we would watch television with the volume turned all the way down and speculate on what was going on. In this way, we would distinguish ourselves from the ordinary masses of students. But we couldn't understand who were these persons. Men with shaved heads, ladies covered with saris, everyone looking bright-faced. So I told my roommate, you have to turn up the volume. We can't figure out who these aliens are. And so we did. And we heard their message, their lifestyle, their disciplines. I looked at my roommate and said, these people have obviously missed the purpose of life.
Right.
1 month later, I was reading Bhagavad Gita while wandering through the New York metropolitan area. I received some literature by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Just a small booklet. I read it immediately, and I was shocked at the profundity. I had never read anyone who was so incisive and so deep. I knew this was special. I had studied the greatest intellects that the ordinary world had to offer. But just by reading a few pages of a small book by Srila Prabhupada, I understood I was in touch with someone who far surpassed the greatest persons ordinarily known. After finishing that small book, I vowed, tomorrow I'm going into Greenwich Village, where there must be bohemian alternative bookshops, and find more literature by this Swami whose name I couldn't pronounce. And I did that. I found Bhagavad Gita, several other books. I took them home and studied them thoroughly, and then decided I need more books by this person. But I don't want to take the chance of encountering those devotees. They look a bit too strange to me. So I made a plan. I will order more books through the mail. I see the address in the book. For more information, write this address in Los Angeles. And so I did. And I began receiving shipments of books from Los Angeles. All the books that were published by Srila Prabhupada at the time. I read them 3 and 4 hours a day for 6 months straight without once thinking I needed to associate, mingle with devotees or hear from them. I was afraid. Who are these persons? Are they hippies? I'm not a hippie. I want to make constructive change in the world. I want to alter the world's socioeconomic, political structures. But I love the books, even though I'm not sure about these people. Somehow, I finally overcame my biases and preconceptions after 6 months of reading 3-4 hours a day. And I did start attending the Krishna Center on Henry Street in Brooklyn. That was late 1972. As soon as I walked in the door, I realized my life was entering another phase. How's that for a story?
So you stayed in Krishna consciousness. So then what happened after that? You remained in New York, or?
I became a full-time staff member at the New York Center. And I was part of the book distribution brigade that would go throughout New York City introducing this greatest literature to whomever we meet on the street, in the subway, at concerts, at movie theaters, at sporting events. Wherever people gathered, that's where we wanted to be, so we could introduce them to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and all the extraordinary bhakti texts.
Let me change the topic now to discuss a little bit about, if you were going to explain Krishna consciousness, definitely I agree with you. To many people we look like some type of alien. But if you were going to explain what Krishna consciousness is in, say, 2 paragraphs, how would you do that? We can unpack it more later.
Understanding the ultimate source as unlimitedly attractive and connecting with that unlimitedly attractive ultimate source. And that connection is 100% harmonious. It's a connection of pure love. Yoga means connection. So what is the ultimate connection? This is why Krishna is irreplaceably essential. The infinitely attractive source to whom we all seek connection.
Would you say that there are the various religions and spiritual processes in the world, are they doing something similar, or how would you describe the differences or similarities?
As Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, everyone is actually following his path in all respects. But you can be positioned differently on that path. In fact, on a path, some can go forward, some can go backwards, some can stall out on the side. Whatever way that people are trying to elevate themselves, the bhakti yogi, the Krishna conscious person, can understand that they're actually seeking Krishna, the ultimate source of pleasure. It takes some skill and knowledge to see how everyone is yearning for that ultimate connection, that ultimate sense of completeness. Now, let's bear in mind that although everyone unconsciously, most everyone unconsciously is searching for that, they can become victimized by many mirages and hallucinations and mistake what is insubstantial for what is substantial. So we need knowledge. Otherwise, in spite of our embedded yearnings for ultimate completion, we can make wrong choices. And we can embark on treks that take us off the desirable path.
What would you say is an example of something like making a wrong choice or getting diverted somehow from the spiritual path, while at the same time imagining that you were not?
One can get caught up in merely gratifying the temporary senses of the temporary body. You could become lost in metaphysical speculation, using our tiny intellect to try and speculate what is inconceivable. One can become sidelined by mystic powers, psychic powers. What the living entity truly desires is pure love, the love supreme, that bhakti relationship between the soul and the supreme soul. That's the ultimate rung on the yoga ladder. Bhakti, pure love and devotion, untinged by any material considerations. That's the ultimate mystic power.
Well, what makes bhakti different from any other kind of spiritual process? Or is it different?
All religion seeks love of God. But the problem is, without in-depth knowledge of the Supreme, how are we going to be attracted? Attraction is the most powerful principle or dynamic of existence. The more you understand how the Supreme is infinitely attractive, the more you'll be in love. So any genuine religion has a concept of the Supreme and having a deeper relationship with the Supreme. But we want to find the greatest intensity, the maximum intensity. And for that maximum intensity, we require the greatest knowledge of the Supreme, because then we'll be more attracted. The more we know, the more we'll love.
What do we actually know about God? I mean, usually we think of God as a fairly mysterious person. In most religious circles, there's not much detailed information. How are the Vedas different?
You see, if I want to understand you, the best way, generally speaking, is to hear from you. So why should we not seek out knowledge of the Supreme coming directly from the Supreme? This is the advantage of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is explaining himself and giving you the process to verify what he's saying. I think everyone can find this is quite reasonable, quite practical, it's quite accessible. If I want to understand you, I listen to you. Also, I can listen to someone who is obviously qualified to discuss you. So in Bhagavad Gita, the prime Bhakti Yoga text, we can hear from Krishna directly. And then in the graduate study to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear from those who are certified in their awareness of Krishna. We hear them explain Krishna. So in this way, we can get it both ways, directly from Krishna and directly from those who are certified in their understanding and knowledge of Krishna. We're dependent on authorities no matter what we do, even for material things. For material knowledge, we're dependent on authorities. In spiritual life, we're also dependent on authorities. Our quest in this lifetime is to find the best authorities who can give the most authoritative knowledge of the ultimate source, authoritative knowledge of the Supreme. And then our love, our bhakti, has a full opportunity to manifest.
How do we evaluate an authority? Anybody can claim to be an authority, and people have all kinds of bona fides. So what is it that makes us choose one over another?
If you say you know what is God, then tell us, explain. Don't say, oh, it's a mystery.
Well, people, all kinds of people explain all kinds of things. How do we?
Explain in depth. Just like if I want to hear about you, or someone claims to know you, they should explain fully all about you. So this is the advantage of hearing directly from Krishna. This is the advantage of hearing from those who are in the know about Krishna. They explain, they expound, and give you the process to verify what they're saying. This is very special. The comprehensiveness, the profundity, the opportunity for verification by our adjusting our own lifestyles so that our life becomes like a laboratory for experiencing what is the ultimate reality, what is unlimitedly attractive, what is the source of all pleasure.
For me, when I first came to the spiritual life, the chanting process had a really big effect on me. I was a real mess. And just the chanting kind of evened me out. Can you explain what role chanting played in your own coming to Krishna consciousness and absorbing it and becoming an exponent?
I was hesitant about chanting the mantra, although I read about it extensively. Obviously, if I was reading 3 hours a day for 6 months, I had come across so much information about the chanting. But for some reason, perhaps that reason being I was a skeptical New Yorker. But maybe that was the reason, or for other reasons, I was hesitant to chant. I remember how I started. After 6 months, I finally went to a Krishna center, Bhakti center, and I got some beads. But I just kept them by my bed. But one morning, I woke up and decided, let me give it a try. So I chanted on one bead and said, okay, that's enough.
Just one bead.
Yes, that's how my Maha Mantra, my mantra meditation career started. Just one bead, one mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, that's it. So I went through a few days like that. And then I started increasing to a few more beads, a few more mantras. And somehow or other, after a week or 10 days, I was up and away. I was into it. Maybe my sudden acceleration into chanting was the fruit of many months of reading about Krishna, understanding the science of the Supreme, even though I wasn't executing it. But all that accumulation of knowledge obviously started to shape my consciousness. And so finally I became motivated to change my lifestyle. And that's when my spiritual development started to take off. Once I started changing my lifestyle.
Maybe for the sake of those who have no information at all about the chanting process, maybe you can outline what the chanting process exactly is and how one can engage in it.
The chanting process, the mantra meditation process, is the recitation of the Maha Mantra, meaning a super excellent mantra, which is prescribed by the Bhakti Yoga texts as the best mantra for this particular day and age when there's so much bewilderment, confusion, hypocrisy, illusion. In other words, when you choose a mantra, you can't be whimsical. It's like when you go to the pharmacy. You have a prescription from the doctor for a particular medicine. Similarly, when we think about mantras, we just don't willy-nilly grab a sound from here, grab a sound from there. We look to the spiritual medical texts and find out what is prescribed. And indeed, the Hare Krishna mantra is prescribed as the best remedy for the polluted consciousness of this present age, these present times that we're living in now. Once we make that mantra meditation, Hare Krishna mantra meditation, a daily practice, then you start seeing transformations. The first awareness you start to achieve is that you're different from the body and mind. Next, you start to experience a cleansing of the consciousness, especially visible in terms of the blazing fire of material desire starting to diminish. It's like you've had a high fever for so long, for many lifetimes, and you've never realized it. But then when you start cooling off, when the fever starts going down, you can understand. I was a blazing inferno before, and that's the source of my problems. Now I'm cooling off. My material hankerings, my material yearnings are decreasing. What a relief. So those are some of the beginning or preliminary realizations that the chanting will bring to you. Ultimately, the chanting is all about the love supreme, connecting to Krishna in pure love.
What would you say were your specific challenges when you first came to Krishna consciousness? Were your friends and family, did they support you, or how did that work?
Honestly, I didn't discuss it with my friends or family. I was quite sure they wouldn't understand. Although my best friend, with whom I used to go here and there in Manhattan with, he one day said to me, even though I never mentioned anything about my newfound treasure, one day he said to me, "What's come over you? You're not the same anymore. What's happening? I'm going to have to find," in his lingo, "I have to find a new running buddy." I didn't say anything because I knew he wouldn't understand. I knew that I come into this world alone and I leave alone. So I have to make some crucial decisions on my own without social pressure, without family pressure. I was at a crucial stage in my life. Should I go the corporate route? Normally when one graduates from Yale, you head for prestige and elitism. But I considered that I was meant for something else. Of course, don't get me wrong, we have so many bhakti yogis, so many Krishna conscious persons in the corporate world. But it seems I was destined to become a specialist. Just like so many students go to the university, but how many of them become professors? But still, you need professors, you need specialists. So I wanted to specialize in the bhakti science.
Do you, oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Did you have some more, you have some more you want
Go
to
on,
say?
go on.
Do you feel that you have lost anything or left anything from having taken the Krishna consciousness? When did you actually take the Krishna consciousness? How old were you then?
I was 21, heading for 22. So when I started reading Bhagavad Gita, that was June of 72. When I started going to the New York Krishna Center, that was November of 72. And by February of 73, I was a resident of the ashram.
So you've never been married, never had a family,
No.
never had a house, never owned a car, never
No.
had a position. Have you felt that any of that is somehow or other missing from your life, and if not, why?
I have friends on every continent of the world. I have places to stay on every continent of the world. My only regret is, how can I become more spiritually dedicated so I can help people better? There's never enough Krishna that you get. There's never enough spiritual advancement to be made. It goes on and on and on unlimitedly. I do regret, why couldn't I have started at a younger age? Why 21? Why not 4 years old or 5 years old? But obviously I had to go through, karmically, what I had to go through. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to go deeply into this knowledge and experience and share it with others. That's the greatest wealth. That's the greatest treasure.
So in our general practice, and also especially since both of us are swamis, we give up so many things. And in general, our process is to give up illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, meat eating. What do we do for fun? How do we actually live without these things that most people consider to be the basic substance of material happiness?
True yoga redefines your concepts of pleasure. Otherwise, believe me, what we're doing would not be possible. The bhakti lifestyle transforms your conceptions of pleasure and happiness. You start to learn and experience that true pleasure and true happiness is in direct relation to the source of pleasure and source of happiness. This is why understanding and experiencing Krishna is so essential. Unless we have higher pleasure, we'll not let go of the material pleasures, the lower pleasures, forgive me for saying that. So therefore, once you realize that you're on a nonstop quest for pleasure and happiness, and of course you want to share that pleasure and happiness with others, the next step should be to think, what is the best pleasure and the best happiness for myself and for sharing with others? If you follow that line of thought, you'll come right to the necessity for Krishna knowledge, the bhakti knowledge. So yes, to ordinary eyes, it looks like we're missing out on the prime necessities of life. The basic bhakti rules that we follow are not meant to make you miserable, they're meant to protect you from misery. In fact, in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls the basic rules that we follow, the regulative principles of freedom. By being able to control your mind and senses, you save yourself from so many debacles, so many catastrophes. You save yourself from a heap of bad karma. So therefore, by contacting the superior pleasure, that's the only way you'll let go of the illusion. Have no doubts about that. We're not magicians. We haven't uncovered any exotic mystic experience. Simply, we have traded what is temporary for what is superlative and eternal. Again, the necessity for understanding the unlimitedly attractive Krishna.
So changing your lifestyle or accepting a different philosophy is an arduous and quite formidable thing. How would you suggest, people kind of break into it, or what would you give as a suggestion for how people approach it?
Through knowledge and through spiritual practice. Some, like me, have to understand exactly what they're doing long before they do it. As I said, I was a skeptical New Yorker. I was living in Manhattan, of all. Others prefer to get right into the Krishna mantra meditation, the sound vibration. And then as they proceed, in that way, they also gradually start picking up some knowledge of why they're doing what they're doing. Maybe for you, it would be a combination of both. Bhakti yoga practice, mantra meditation, combined with the acquisition of comprehensive spiritual knowledge. There is a personal way for any of you to begin your bhakti development. There's no one size fits all. We're all individuals. Therefore, there's room for variegatedness in how we take up the bhakti path, the Krishna conscious path.
So you spend a lot of time in New Zealand and other places. You also
every continent of the world.
What would you say is different between the way people are, or the way they experience spiritual life in, say, the United States, and the way they do in other countries?
Abroad, the USA is known as, quote, that religious country. That's how the media in more secular countries of the first world portrays the USA. That country where an amazing proportion of people still claim to believe in God and identify with a religion, go to some kind of religious establishment. It's very perplexing for persons in more secular parts of the first world. So yes, the USA has a lot of religious sentiment. What's required, though, is deeper spiritual understanding, comprehensive spiritual knowledge, and lifestyle transformation. So in that way, because of that tremendous religious sentiment that still exists in the USA, you could say it's a special country. But we have to capitalize on that good fortune of religious sentiment and go deeper, go further. Then again, sometimes in these countries, like New Zealand, where I spend 3 months or so of the year, or Australia, or the UK, even though they don't have that tremendous religious inclination as visible as in the USA, still it can be easier to introduce them to the bhakti knowledge because they don't have many spiritual preconceptions. For example, there's a piano school, classical piano school in Vienna, Austria, I've heard about this, that has two different rates of tuition. It's a world famous piano school. They charge one rate if you've had piano lessons before, and another rate if you haven't. The ones who have had piano lessons before coming to this school pay more because they have to be unlearned. So having a background of religious sentiment can be an advantage, and it can also be a disadvantage. How's that for skirting around your question?
I thought you pretty much got to at least an important aspect of the difference in the cultures.
Mm-hmm.
How would you characterize your own coming to Krishna consciousness? Did it happen all at once, or you would say it happened gradually, or how would you characterize it?
As a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, I was always interested in God, and I was always interested in religions. I would, in New York City, growing up in Queens, even at that time in the 50s and early 60s, the neighborhoods were so multi-ethnic on my street. There were at least 10 nationalities, all in the same block. And then the schools I went to were basically like 40-50% Jewish. So I was always interested in religion, other religions, how people thought of God and how they lived their life in relation to God. I always was thinking about that and asking questions. Even though I was 7, 8, 9 years old, I would ask persons questions about their spirituality. So I can see that what I'm doing now is an outgrowth of how I was as a child. But honestly, when I presented this to my mother, she didn't see it. I said, "Mother, didn't you know I was a very religious child?" She said, "No." Well, she had me reciting Bible verses when I was 5 years old before the whole church congregation. I think she didn't realize how deeply doing that impacted me. She used to always read me Bible stories when I was an infant. I relished it very greatly, but perhaps she didn't realize how what she was doing was affecting my core. And then my first grade, second grade, third grade in Queens, part of New York City, I went to Lutheran school. And then my mother didn't have enough money for me to continue in the private Lutheran school. So I had to switch to public school. But the Lutheran school told my mother, if he will just promise to be a Lutheran priest, we'll pay for his education. But she thought that for a 8 or 9-year-old to make such a vow was a bit premature.
Already promising to be a priest.
Then when I was 13 years old, I gave my first sermon in the Presbyterian church. Then don't ask me what happened after that. It's teenage time, you know. But when I was 16, I heard a recording by a famous musician, John Coltrane, entitled "A Love Supreme." And along with the recording, he composed some notes about how love of God is the ultimate goal of life. Everything we do is for achieving love of God, and how he wasn't going to play music the same way as he did it before. Everything was going to be an offering to that love supreme. So I thought, wow, this sounds like the ultimate goal of life. Love supreme, pure love of God. But where do I find that? So that was when I was 16 or 17. 5 years later or so. 5 years later or so, that's when I started reading Bhagavad Gita. And all the pieces fell into place.
So I thank you very much for your agreeing to this interview. And I know it will help people, because generally when we see spiritual life through specific eyes of different individuals, it gives us such a different perspective. And spiritual life usually does start by touching somebody in some way or another and feeling that their commitment sparks our own commitment. So I hope you'll forgive me for dragging you all the way over here and all the rigors that it took to try to put together this interview. But
Yes, I've got to get used to traveling on the New York subways again. I've been overseas for many decades, so Chandrasekhar Swami has reintroduced me to the glories of the New York subway system.
So stay tuned. We're going to have other people to be interviewed in the same format, and I thank you all for your attention. And so we say goodbye with Hare Krishna.